Hi guys, this is Raoul Monks, founder and director of Flume Training. Thanks for coming to the first of many Flume Chat sessions. The purpose of these are to share best practice from around the industry by bringing in some of the strongest performers and thought leaders around media and events and B2B sales and sales leadership. Today we've got Sajeeda Merali and we're going to be answering the question, which is how do you pivot from live events to virtual events? I've been working with Saj in many capacities as a sales trainer with her teams, with the sales leadership teams over the year, and have a lot of time for her opinion. So I wanted to bring her in today for the first guest. So I'm going to hand over to Saj in a moment just to give a bit of a background as to how she's finding things and a little bit about who she is. And then we're going to dive into that question as to what do you do around pivoting to digital events. So Saj, just give us your view as to kind of the situation right now, who you are, a bit of a background, then we'll dive into the subject.
Okay, well, thanks, Ralph, for inviting me. It's really nice to speak to you this morning. So yeah, you're definitely asking me to show my age now, but around 20 years of media sales experience all in. Started my career at VNU, 15 or so years at Incisive Media, and then InfoPro Digital. And most recently just finished a year and 8 months at Euromoney. And this current situation that we all find ourselves in, it's been really eye-opening, as apart from being involved as a delegate at the recent influx of virtual event offerings, yeah. I've been consulting and speaking with many past colleagues and market contacts about what they're doing during this time. And one thing that is very apparent, those businesses that have spent time diversifying their revenue streams are finding it so much easier to sort of flex and focus in different directions, rather than having to start their business from scratch.
So in terms of kind of flexing, a big piece of this quite obviously is that a lot of events are being cancelled and a lot of people are trying to shift that revenue to those virtual revenue streams. What are your thoughts on kind of the cancelling of events and that pivot over?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult time, especially for those companies that are purely aligned to events. It really is a tough time, but I'm always the optimist, but I strongly believe that with every challenge, there comes an incredible opportunity. I mean, if you think about it, we've literally accelerated our move to, digital transformation overnight. Some businesses have been trying to strategize over this for years and months. Yeah. And this has forced us in that direction, if you like, and everyone's in the same boat. So there is an opportunity. I mean, with physical events needing to be cancelled for the short to medium term, the conversation with clients, I think, really does need to go completely back to basics. When we think about why that sponsor decided to spend that sponsorship money to begin with, what business objective were they trying to achieve? I think there's a real need to get inside the head of your client. I mean, you spoke about it the other day at your webinar. Yeah. Really standing in their shoes, understanding the ROI that they need to achieve, and obviously help them move towards that. But it may be in different ways.
So just interested on this, because we talk a lot about kind of focusing on why people do stuff and going back to that as opposed to just thinking about what you're selling. Why do you think that is so important right now for salespeople to be focused on kind of why the client needs to do anything?
Well, I think there needs to be a certain amount of sensitivity to the situation, and ultimately, if we sort of bring it back to, live events versus a virtual event, as much as we could sort of position it as a like for like, it isn't. You're not comparing apples and apples. The reason that sponsors and exhibitors would have bought into an event, I mean, it would have been for a variety of reasons, such as demonstrating thought leadership, content alignment, but also, and probably mainly, they've bought into it for the opportunity for networking and that face-to-face conversation. They want their key salespeople on the floor ready to network and generate more business. And typically, you might have booked the sponsorship deal with a marketing director, and they've had to liaise internally about that idea. So I mean, Raoul, you've often told me there's a number of different people involved in the decision. Is it 6.2? Am I remembering right? Is it 6.2?
No, 6.8. But I reckon that's gone up.
Okay.
I think it's gone up.
So that marketing person has, on average, gone inside internally and sold their positioning, that event positioning, to 6.8 different stakeholders. And they've probably done that with the view that, you know, the people that are going to be present at the event are going to have an opportunity to have face-to-face time with their target audiences.
Yeah.
So, you know, yes, there's other things like being aligned to the event for its content, but essentially your sponsor is doing that event to generate more sales through face-to-face opportunities with that community. So, and we all know that I think there's a different dimension that comes with doing an event and that face-to-face interaction. And it's one of the reasons that the events industry has been so successful to date. So what's massively important at this time, I think, is that salespeople, you know, don't just go and put on a like-for-like virtual event and say, hey, sponsor, don't worry, you know, we've done an online version and you're going to get exactly the same from your sponsorship. Because actually in the client's head, you know, what they've previously agreed to spend their money on, it's not the same. And I think we really need to appreciate that goalpost has been shifted completely.
Can you just give us some examples when you say it's not the same from a client's perspective? What do you see as kind of the big differences? Why do you not see it as the same?
Okay. Well, I think, look, let's look before we assume that everyone knows what a virtual event is. I think it's worth just thinking about what that looks like, because they do vary as well. There's so many different platforms. I mean, there's, you know, obviously the piece to camera type thing that you did the other day. Yeah, there's the, you know, you've got virtual round table style things where you've got lots of people logging in, and, you know, all the way up to virtual expos where you can move in between rooms and exhibitors can host virtual stands. But, you know, so there are things that they do have in common, but ultimately that face-to-face interaction and that face-to-face element isn't there. But things they do have in common, so there's a marketing piece that comes before. You know, or any event owner will be doing some marketing to generate delegates and awareness of that event. There's obviously the go live day itself. And then there's the after event experience for sponsors. And I think this is the bit in particular that sponsors can really benefit from the virtual experience because of the richness of the data that comes through with that virtual offering.
That's interesting. So let's just have a quick think about, from a salesperson's perspective, the people listening to this, or sales leaders listening to this as well, yeah, that switch from sponsorship at a conference or an event to virtual webinars. Like, how do they make that switch? How do they get the client to understand what the differences are and see it, I don't know if it's possible, but as an opportunity as opposed to an issue?
Yeah. Okay, so let's assume you've decided to replace a live event with a virtual event. I think, look, again, just I feel like I'm repeating, but I think going back to standing in your client's shoes and understanding, you know, how they will be measuring success. And to do this, it's really about, like I said, bringing it back to basics and being able to generate more sales for them. So if we think about why that client previously bought into your live event, well, the sponsor may have wanted to get alignment against good content and be aligned to your brand. So tick, they can have that with a virtual version. You know, you get all the marketing that goes before, and their alignment can be associated with that. Number two, the sponsor would want to be positioned potentially as a thought leader and be aligned to the content. And, you know, by being positioned as an expert, they're opening doors for their salespeople to have conversations. So again, a virtual event can offer this. You know, it allows opportunities for spots on the panels or being part of that discussion. So again, tick, that they can achieve that. I think this is where it becomes really interesting is, I suppose, that one of the things that as an event sponsor would very often do is really want to get an understanding of who's going to be in the room. You know, they'll often ask for delegate lists, or, you know, who's in the room, so they can share that with their salespeople or their BDMs that are going to be there on the day. And, you know, they can then ascertain, are there potential clients there, are there existing clients that they can upsell to? And so this is where it becomes really interesting, because actually part of the registration process, if you want it to, for a virtual event can be quite detailed.
Yeah.
So you get a really, really good understanding of, you know, of who's going to be attending, or who's registering, or who's interested in certain sessions. And in fact, you can start thinking about an online event more as lead generation rather than just a virtual version of what you were doing face to face. So things like account-based marketing becomes so much more prevalent. You can be really specific around numbers, about target accounts, and you and your sponsor can really work together to kind of get those metrics in place, so that actually you both understand, you know, exactly what that success measure looks like, and what, you know, what's really going to be a good ROI for that client.
Okay, it's really interesting. So if I was a salesperson or sales leader looking to replace my live events with virtual, what advice, if you were to kind of try to sum it up, what sort of advice would you give me? What should I remember? What should I have in mind when we're trying to do that and working with clients in the best way?
I think the real thing to think about is, one, moving it away from the day itself. So really thinking about, you know, the follow-up, you know, the rich data that comes from the kind of questions those delegates will ask, or the way they might poll when you put a poll live, and you know, the amount of analytics and data that you can collect from doing a virtual event. Actually, what it does is it pushes the focus away from event day to actually what happens after. And actually, if you can work with the client to put the focus on what happens after, what happens around the follow-up, so that sponsors are able to focus more sales efforts towards those analytics, and actually, you know, think about what kind of follow-up conversations they're going to have that's then going to result in a sale or building up their pipeline further. So yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, definitely pushing the focus more towards the follow-up, but then also I think, you know, ultimately it's about listening, it's about standing in their shoes, and it's about really getting under the skin of, you know, what was the reason they did it in the first place. It was to generate sales for themselves. And, you know, if you can provide a solution that does that, albeit in a different way, then ultimately you're going to have a much better relationship at the end of it, because you've met their success criteria.
So it genuinely sounds like it is possible to position this as an opportunity as opposed to an issue with a client, to sum that up.
100%. I mean, look, this is absolutely an opportunity for traditional event sponsors to try something different or flex more in that digital direction. And look, of course, face-to-face events will have a space again. You know, they always will, and it's just not a solution for right now. So my advice would be, pitching a virtual event as a like for like to a physical face-to-face event is probably not the way to go.
Yeah.
You know, and like, bring that conversation around business continuity, lead generation, pipeline building, and also understanding data and analytics more, which will then in turn move to sales for your client, but in a different way.
Really, really interesting. Saj, I really appreciate your time, and hopefully at home you guys can take something from what Saj has said and put it into practice in your teams and with your events as well. I am going to ask you one final question, Saj. So we're going to do this with everyone, just so we can kind of get an idea of tips and do's and don'ts. So if you had one piece of advice for salespeople or sales leaders right now, what would it be?
I think you've got to listen, be empathetic towards you know, what they're going through at the moment, but also really listen to what their objectives are and stand in their shoes.
Fantastic. Okay, very in line with what we talk about, but it's so important. And the way we look at it right now is that the sales experience has become more exaggerated in terms of the impact it's going to have on the client. So some of the fundamentals that we all know, but sometimes maybe could get away without doing, have become more important right now. So listening, empathizing, and putting yourself in their shoes, never been more important.
Yeah, agree.
Thank you very much, Saj, and thank you for everyone for listening. And we're going to be trying to do these on a regular basis on different areas. So if you've got topics that you want us to look into, or experts you think we should get on here onto this panel, we're trying to do everything we can at Flume Sales Training to help everyone get through this in the best way possible. So please share this, please comment, please like, get in touch if we can help. Stay safe. Thanks a lot. Cheers, Saj.
Bye. Thanks.